Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Good morning here in Sydney and wherever you are. Good evening to you. Good day. Yes, Lagos. Lady K from Douala. You're welcome. Thank you for joining me. Gabriel from Kano. God bless you. Thank you so much. Wow, what a day. Oh, Basid from Chicago. Wow, amazing. Amazing to be here with you. I'll just have a quick sip of coffee. Hey. Wow, Kungwe from Swansea. Oh, wow, amazing. So good to see you here. Well, thank you for joining me. Please make sure you share this link with everyone you know, with your friends, with your teenagers, young people, young adults, whoever you're connected to or you know you love. Please share the screen. I'm not. Can you hear me clearly? Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Yeah, Gabriel from Kano. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Amazing. Wow, what a day. What a day. What a day. Yeah, blessing. Blessing is anticipating insights from today's session. Yes, you will get a lot of insights from today's session. We're talking about the neuroscience of imaginations. Zara from Auckland. Oh, Zari from Auckland. Wow, amazing. Tosin from Germany. Wow, great, great. It's a global event. Mushokbe from Oyo State. Well, welcome, Mushokbe. Good, 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 good. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being here. Please feel free to share this link with your friends. Feel free to invite anyone. Put it on all your WhatsApp groups and your status on your social media platforms. Bring people, invite them, tell them to come and get great value. All right. So thank you so much for being here. Um, I will go into this session right now because we've got a lot to cover. We've got a lot to cover. Today we will be talking about the neuroscience of imagination and dreams. Yes, the neuroscience of imagination and dreams, and there's a lot to cover here. All right, I hope you're as excited as I am. I hope you're as excited as I am. Just managing multiple screens now. Wow, amazing. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. You are welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Kinsley from Lagos, you're welcome. Amazing, amazing. Tracy, good morning. I see you. Hey, my good friend Jimmy. Yeah, all the way from Dallas. Thank you, sir, for connecting. Thank you, sir, for connecting. Thank you for joining. We're gonna have an amazing time. Yes, Onyeka from Melbourne. Thank you so much. Thank you. Waking up early in Melbourne. Hope it's not too cold. It's warm here in Sydney this morning. Armor from River State. All right, good. Now let's get into this. Let's get into this. Okay, I won't take our time. Of course, in the last few months, if you've been watching my videos and following me, you would have been aware of this series that I do from time to time. And this year we've had a session on the neuroscience of silence. A few months ago, we had one on the neuroscience of creativity, um, and today we'll be looking at imagination and dreams. So I acknowledge all of you joining. Please share the link with your friends, bring them here, share with your teens, share with your young people, everyone, bring them in. Let's go. So today we'll be focusing on imagination and dreams, and I am hoping that we'll all have a great time today. The neuroscience of imagination and dreams. That's what we're focusing on today. Now, let me quickly start with some assumptions. I need to knock off some assumptions. Now, I've got a lot of content. I've got a lot of content. So I have to go through this as fast as I can so that we can be on time so that I can leave here on time. All right, so let's just deal with some presumed notions, some assumptions that a lot of people have, okay, from the start. Some people have some of this assumption. Some people assume that imagination is only for children, that children are the only ones that can really, have this wild, vivid imagination. Some people believe imagination is only for artists or for those who are creatives, those who are gifted and talented in special ways. Yeah, yeah, they're the only ones that can, really enhance or use the power of their imagination to create things and make a difference. That's what some people believe. Another assumption that you may have here is that imagination is just the opposite of reality, and that imagination does not reflect reality and does not affect reality. Well, you may be wrong about that, okay? And these are assumptions that we need to really deal with, okay? Some people assume that imagination is fixed and cannot be improved, all right, and that you cannot enhance, you know, the power of your imagination, which is where I'll be spending a lot of time. Okay, and we're going to pull down these assumptions and myths one by one so that we can understand what imagination really is. I'm hoping that at the end of this webinar, you'll understand what imagination really is and what it is not. You'll understand the neurobiological basis for imagination, and you'll understand how you can enhance the power of your imagination to improve, your productivity, how you can enhance the power of your imagination to, you know, um, grow and to enhance your creativity as well. So there are a lot of things that we'll be talking about today. So you must never allow these false assumptions to limit the potential of your imagination. All right. Everyone has imagination, and that's why we can generate ideas and explore different perspectives in life. All right. But you can enhance and improve your imagination. And we're going to be talking a lot more about that as we go ahead. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. You can hear me loud and clear. If you can hear me loud and clear, put it in the chat loud and clear, loud and clear. I'm going to be engaging today because there's going to be a lot of interaction. So please do not stay far away from your keyboard. Do not stay far away from, engaging with me. And team, please just put it on the screen when I have, you know, interesting comments. Laura's Delights, all the way from Canada. Laura's Delights, all the way from Canada. I see. Yeah, thank you so much, Timmy. Loud and clear, Timmy. Yeah, thank you so much for connecting. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on. Now, let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question. Let me challenge you with this question. Okay, I have a question for you. Question for you. Question time. All right. Just imagine this. Suppose you woke up one day with no capacity for imagination. Just, Imagine this. Suppose you woke up one day and you have no capacity for imagination. You woke up with no capacity for imagination. Suppose that happens to you. How will life be? Have you thought about that? Can you imagine a life without imagination? Can you imagine waking up one day and not being able to paint a mental picture of anything, not being able to imagine anything? All right. Suppose you woke up one day without an imagination. Let me just explore these possibilities and let's see what life would be. Say some things will be easier. If you woke up one day without imagination, some things would be easier. I actually think so. And some of you will back me up on this. Some things will be easier. Okay. Choosing dresses. Yeah. There'll be no wavering on what clothes to wear. You don't have to, because you can't imagine it. You don't have imagination. So, it'll be easy for you to just pick up something. You don't have to see yourself in any particular dress. Shopping for dresses will be easy. Is that correct? Is that correct? Do you feel me? You woke up one day with no imagination and you just go into your walk-in wardrobe. All right. You just pick up something. You really don't have to spend too much time making a choice about what to wear. Lady K says nightmare. Yes, it'll be a nightmare. Well, all right. Some things will be easier. You wake up without imagination. All right. What about choosing the food that you want to eat? All right. You deciding what to eat will be easy. Some things will just be easier because you can't imagine and paint that picture. You don't have to think about what to eat. You don't have to create. You don't have to, you know, crack your head or your brain to make a choice. Some things will just be easier. Making options will be easier because you can really consider those options in detail, particularly options that involve your daily tasks. It'll just be easy. You just go for it. You don't have to really imagine and dig deep into the different consequences of the decisions you make on a daily basis. You just go for it. Just imagine a life without imagination. Well, if some things will be easier, some things may be harder. You will find some things that you wake up one day without imagination, some things will be harder. All right. You know, yeah. Watching a show on Netflix will suck because you will not be able to fill in the gaps in these interesting movies, or you will not be able to anticipate the next movie, the next move, or the next plot in a movie. You know why we enjoy movies? We enjoy movies because we can fill in the gaps. And great storytellers are able to do that. They give us different scenes and allow us to fill in the gaps and to use our imagination to go along with the director of the movie to enjoy the experience. Imagine if you had no imagination. You would the movies will make no sense to you. You would not be able to connect. It's only saying that there will be no depression or mental health issues. You think, well. All right. So some things will be difficult. Watching movies will be difficult. What about reading novels? Reading novels will be difficult because it will be hard for you to just go through the devastating and absurd plot lines within some of these interesting novels. Harry Potter will make no sense if you read it. If you had no imagination, how can you enjoy, Lord of the Flies? How can you enjoy Harry Potter as a novel? All right. What about games of pretense like charades? I don't know how many of you have done charades before. How would you do a game of charades without imagination? How would you be able to describe and pretend to be like a policeman or to be like a firefighter or to be like a soldier to your mates when you're playing a game of charades? How can you, because you can't imagine it. Every time you play a game of charades and you're trying to pretend to be something without talking, or you're trying to describe a word, an object, a thing, so that the people that are watching you can give you a response, you have to imagine yourself doing that. And you're trying to describe someone and something. You need imagination for that. The games of pretense will suck. How can you pretend to be a bodybuilder if you can't imagine being one? If you wake up one day without imagination, life would be difficult. Guess what? Your honesty will be unrivaled. If you woke up without imagination, it will be difficult for you to conjure a lie. It will be so hard for you to lie that your honesty will be piercing. When you can imagine things being different than they are, because you can't imagine any other option. All you can do is to tell the truth. You say the truth all the time. That would be really good, isn't it? It would be so hard to tell a lie. You won't even be able to conceive a lie, much less tell one. You just be a straight shooter. You just say the things the way they are. Yeah, some things will be hard if you woke up one day and you lack imagination. Well, some things may be better. And one of the things that may be better is that you probably have no worry about the future, a future you cannot imagine. How can you worry about a future you cannot imagine? All right. Many a times when we worry, is it not because we're able to create the future? And when there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of doom and gloom about the future, we get drowned in the worry and the anxiety of today over the future, isn't it? Is that not what happens many times when we're just too overwhelmed? Imagine a life without imagination. If you cannot imagine a future, if you cannot imagine the negative outcomes of a future, why worry about a future you cannot imagine? A life without imagination. Maybe it's a life that no one would ever live. But I thought it's a way to start, to imagine our lives without imagination. If our lives have no imagination, then there's no reality. Kathy said, out of imagination, things become reality. We're boring. Yeah, life will be boring. Nothing will make sense. Conversations will be dry. When people tell you stories, when your children come back from school and they tell you how their day has been, you will not be able to fit in into that narrative. You will not be able to picture the experience. You will not be able to generate empathy. You would watch movies, you watch ads, you will listen to people, and you will not be able to connect because you cannot imagine. You cannot put yourself in their shoes. You cannot share the experience. You cannot daydream. You cannot have fantasies. You cannot even look forward to a date that you're having with someone special because you can't even picture what it's going to be like. You cannot even make decisions and really, brainstorm about heavy, big decisions if you cannot imagine. I can only imagine how life would be if we could not imagine, how miserable our lives would be, and how empty they would be without imagination. Imagine a life without imagination. Life would suck. All right. So, what really is imagination? What really is imagination? Are you feeling me? Are you feeling me? Is everyone feeling me? I need to get myself some energy. Hey, wow. What is imagination? Let's get cracking. Let's get cracking. So, imagination is one of the basic functions of our minds. You can talk about logical reasoning, willpower, our memory, our perception, our intuition, the different aspects of our minds and different functions of our minds. And imagination is one of those central parts of our mind, one of those central core dimensions of our minds. Imagination is that ability that we have to be able to connect our world, with our with us, with our essence. It allows us to be able to experience our world in a different way and internalize our world. So, imagination is the ability to form mental images or narratives. All right. And I will come to that. Some people do not have the capacity to form mental images, and it's a medical condition for that. We'll come back to that. But imagination is the ability for you to form a mental picture endogenously, that's internally generated mental picture or mental narrative about anything that you have not perceived through your senses, meaning that what you're imagining does not necessarily have to do with what you have sensed. And I'll come back to that. I'll talk about imagination and perception, all right, and the differences and how they work together, and how you can use your imagination to improve your perception through your senses. We'll come back to that. But as a simple definition, it is the ability of the mind to conceive, to generate mental images or narratives, all right, that are not necessarily perceived through senses. All right, a simple dictionary definition is to form a mental image, to picture something. But as I've said, some people have a difficulty in forming mental pictures, and you might have met some people like that who cannot create mental pictures, but they can still form narratives in their minds. Otherwise their life still will be boring. They can still follow a movie script and fill in the gaps. They can form, narratives about different things, but maybe not crisp, clear images in their minds. Okay, so imagination is about visualizing or seeing an image with your mind's eye. What you can Another way of looking at it is imagination. Imaginations are visual thoughts. We all think, but imagine that we think in pictures. When we think in pictures, or we think like in a movie script, you imagine that is imagination. I'm using a lot of words there. Part of my tautology. All right. So imagination is visualization or seeing an image with the mind's eye. Let me just break down that word imagination, just using the etymology of the word from English. Of course, the word is derived from certain Latin words. Okay. So imagination on its own, all right, is derived from the word imagine, which is a verb. All right. And in Latin, it's imaginary. Okay, that's imagine. And that's derived from a noun, image. We're familiar with image, or in the Latin, imago, image. All right. So without an image, you can't imagine. So imagination is painting a mental picture, all right, of an image. Yes. All right. And that word image is actually derived from the word imitate or imitare, which is to make a copy. So to imagine is to make a mental copy, all right, to create a virtual copy, all right, of an image in your mind that you can process, you can engage with, all right, and you can express in any way or form. So let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question. For those of you on the call right now, thank you for joining, and please make sure you share the screen with you, share the link with your friends, and invite them. We're going to have a good time today. Let me ask you a quick question, and please put it on the chat, please. All right. Quick question. Wherever you are in the world, answer this question. What did you have for breakfast? What did you have for breakfast? Well, I've not had anything for breakfast. So most of us in Australia here are just waking up in the morning. So nothing yet for breakfast for me. But maybe for if you live in Australia or New Zealand in Asia Pacific, what did you have for breakfast yesterday? Can you just put one or two comments for me? Put them up for me. Wow, that is exciting. Yam and beef soup. Oh, yam and beef sauce. Wow. Put it up, put it up. What did you have for breakfast? Yeah, coffee. Well, that's what I am having. Coffee. Wow. Rice and chicken stew. Whoa, 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 whoa. Put it up, put it up, put it up. Bread and beans. Come on. I think I saw Weet-Bix there. I saw Weet-Bix. Tracy Smith said Weet-Bix. Wow. All right. Wow. Coke and milk. All right. Now, what if I challenged you with this? In order for you to recall what you had for breakfast, you had to imagine it. You had to paint that picture in your mind again of what you had. For those of you that put it up in the chat, and all sorts you've put there. You to paint that mental picture again. You had to create it in your mind again, almost reliving that experience again of what happened. That's imagination, right? So I asked you a question: what did you have for breakfast? In order to recall it, you imagined it again. You created that picture again. You developed a virtual copy of that experience in your mind again. All right. Whatever it was, you did it just now. All right. Let me talk a little bit about images, mental images, because they're very, very important here when we talk about imagination. All right. So, to trigger the memory of this morning's breakfast, it's to engage in imagination. All right. Particularly when that memory involves a mental image. All right. So, if I were to think about what I have for breakfast or what I would like to have for breakfast, so you ask me, what would you like to have for breakfast, Dr. Nee? I've not had breakfast yet. So I can imagine maybe two options. All right. I can imagine a nice, simple breakfast of some, egg and hash brown and some tomatoes with a cup of coffee. That would be something that I already know, and I put there what I know. I know, standard English breakfast. I've had it so many times. So if you ask me, what would you like to have for breakfast? All right, I can go back to my past and recall from the past, bring up some ideas, and that would form a mental image that I can use to, describe that. So that can be the image that comes to my mind when I'm thinking about what I like to have for breakfast. Well, I could also think about something I do not know. I can think about a kind of meal I've not had before. And to be honest with you, this second image, I don't understand what it is. I just went on to Chat GPT and I said, Chat GPT, create a meal for me for 2080. I don't know whether I'll be alive in 2080. And I said, Chat GPT, create a meal for me for, a breakfast for 2080. And Chat GPT presented me a 3D printed breakfast, which I'm sharing with you. Now, I have not imagined that, but since I saw that picture, I just started to imagine what a breakfast would be like in 100 years' time. I don't think I'll be around. I certainly will not be around, but some people will be around. Now, tell me, what is that? What did ChatGPT put together? Is that bacon? Is that chicken? Is that bread? 3D printed bread and some butter? I've got no idea what that is, but it looks interesting enough. And that triggered something in my mind, just, activated something in my mind about, thinking about the future and what the meals and the foods of the future will be like. And as you're there watching me right now, listening to me right now, you can start to imagine what, the future would be like and what, if our grandchildren or great grandchildren, or if you live long enough, another 100 years, maybe you're here, you're a teenager, and you live that long, what kind of breakfast will be served in the cafes or even at home in 100 years' time. So when you ask me, what would I like to have for breakfast? I would often go to my past experience, what I have seen, what I have known. I can create a picture of the kind of ideal breakfast that I would love. But there's another dimension of imagination, which is what allows us to create, which allows us to open new frontiers, to push through different boundaries. And that's creating stuff that we did not even know. So that means that our minds have the capacity to not just imagine the things we know, our minds have the capacity to imagine and conjure up things we do not know or experience. So my mind can imagine my first date with my wife, married now almost 15 years, and I can imagine our first date together, and I can imagine the joy and the pleasure and the fondness and the togetherness. And still, yet, my mind can imagine going on a date with Princess Diana, who died when I was still a kid. My mind, I can daydream about Princess Diana. It would never happen. She's dead. But I can imagine going with her on the first date, down the beach, walking on the sand barefooted, and just playing games and having fun and having a chat. And she telling me about life. And I telling her about life. I can imagine our minds are capable of crazy things. Power of imagination. So when we imagine futuristic things, we use the word imaginary, isn't it? We use the imaginary to talk about things that only exist in our imagination. They're separate, they're distinct from reality. All right. So I'm never going to be on a date with Princess Diana, but I can daydream about her and I can imagine that that's imaginary. It only exists in my imagination. Let me move on quickly. So this illustrates two types of mental images that we can form. We can form mental images about what we already know based on our past experience, but we can also use that in a way. Like I know Princess Diana. I've read about her. I've never met her before, but I understand her life. I've watched documentaries about her. I have watched, different movies about her. And so I can insert myself into a script about her and pretend to be Prince Charles, the good version of Prince Charles, now King Charles. I can pretend to be in her life and have a romantic getaway with her, all in my bedroom or office. Mental images. So imaginary images. All right. It's a great kind of thinking that allows us to step outside of what is possible, allows us to use our imagination to build things that do not exist. And we do that all the time when we fantasize. We do that all the time. It's a different kind of thinking that allows us to step outside of what is possible. We use the word imaginary. Here, the emphasis is on the capacity of our imaginations to enrich, reach, and elaborate thought processes. We're able to go beyond the possible to the realm of the impossible with our minds. All right. And we can do that in different ways. Let me just give you an example. Have you ever watched um, a comedy show? I'm going to tell you that very quick. Let me just read this. Imaginary images, they involve engaging in rich, elaborate, and cognitively safe. And I'm going to come back to that. Rich, elaborate, and cognitively safe thoughts about the possible, the fantastical, fantasies, and the unreal. So with our minds, we can create these mental images in a rich and elaborate and a fantastic way, but still cognitively safe. Cognitively safe because we can still differentiate between reality and imagination. So if I'm here and I spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes daydreaming about Princess Diana and my wife interrupts me, I know that my wife is reality. I know that Princess Diana is not real. She's only a figment of my imagination. I am cognitively intact. So that daydream is a cognitively safe mental exercise. But some people cannot differentiate between reality and imagination. I'll come back to that. So what we're talking about here is, you know, something that is cognitively safe. Now imagine you watching a stand-up comedian. And it could be anyone. It could be, I just Googled stand-up comedian, and one of the first pictures that came to me, I thought it was a good-looking man. He's recovered from that nasty slap he suffered a few, I think last year or whenever. Okay. But just imagine this man, Chris Rock, you watching his Netflix special or listening to him on, watching his comedy. It requires a lot of imagination to be able to follow any stand-up comedian, because stand-up comedians, what do? They tell us stories, most of them nonsensical stories. They put themselves in awkward, story plots, tell us things that do not exist. They tell It's a work of fiction, isn't it? They tell us fiction. Oh yeah, I traveled here. Oh, I met this person. Oh, I did this. A lot of sometimes they tell us the truth, or they use their life story to teach a lesson, and but they dramatize it and exaggerate and they stretch it, and we follow them, isn't it? We follow them. We walk in their shoes. So whether it's Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock or any of these guys, we follow them. All right, and as they tell their story, we're able to go along with them and follow them in that journey of the unreal, the journey of the impossible. And we laugh and we're able to generate a lot of positive emotions and laugh, and and at the end of the day you say, hey, I had a good time. Well, you paid how many $100 to listen to a man tell you unreal things, fiction, but you followed it, and you were glued, and you laughed, and you jeered, and he cursed, and you still laughed at his curses. That is imagination in action. So those are imaginary images, because what they would often talk about are things that are not real. What about you reading a fictional book? You picking up a work of fiction and just reading it. It's not real. The storylines are not real. The characters are not real. But it's a storybook. It's a fiction. All right. Imaginary images come into play. And if you read a work of fiction, you need your imagination to follow the book and enjoy it. Otherwise, it will be nonsense. What about watching a kid do pretend play? A kid who is just an average, simple kid pretending to be Superman or pretending to be Flash or Iron Man, whatever it is. In that kid's mind, they are living a dream, and you can step back as a parent or as an observer and watch that kid have fun as Spider-Man. You know reality that they are not Spider-Man, but you can look at them and put yourself in their shoes and just connect with them and observe them and see how the kid is smiling, wanting to save the world. Imaginary images. Or maybe you're at your office daydreaming, or listening to me right now, you're daydreaming. You're daydreaming. Yeah, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Same thing. You're writing a poem, same thing. All these activities involve imaginary images. So when we engage in these activities, we pursue the unknown. Oftentimes, when we engage in these activities, or you're pretending to be Iron Man, or watching a kid pretend to be Iron Man, I don't know what Iron Man is. I've not seen Iron Man. It's not something I know. Well, I've watched the movie, but I can watch a kid enjoy that, and I can follow them in that journey, that exploration, that mental exercise. But as I said, yeah, sometimes people may cannot separate fantasy from reality. We see that, for example, in people who have schizophrenia, where they hear voices and they hear this and they see this, and to be honest with you, they can't separate it. Then that's not cognitively safe. All right, they have hallucinations and they have all this, what is not real is so real to them, and they cannot separate reality from their imagination. They can't. You know, very interesting, very interesting story here. And I see it with a lot of sensitivity. I hope you're still with me. Stay with me. Stay with me. Um, I was in the medical school, and one of our friends, he wasn't a medical student, but he had a mental illness. All right, and I think he had the bipolar thing, but then became schizophrenic, really, frankly, psychotic. Okay, and he was saying all sorts and screaming, and he was completely out of it. So we took him to the psychiatric hospital, and while he was in the emergency waiting room of the psychiatric hospital, was another woman there who we did not know. We not never met that woman. That woman was also having a psychotic episode. All right. And she was also hearing voices, and you could see she was talking, and she was speaking so loud. She was agitated. She was very forceful, and she had to be to be restrained by her relatives. And before you know it, the two of them started communicating. This young man and this older woman, who were both psychotic, started talking to each other. And they started talking about a third person who was not in the room, but who they could see and they could hear. And they had this, interesting conversation. And I was looking at them, I was like, what's going on here? These are two people who are mentally unwell, and we're trying to get them treatment, but who are engaging and with so high energy, and they were describing things in detail, giving vivid descriptions of the third person and what had happened, and talking about, it just did it begged belief. I just couldn't. I was amazed that for them in that instance, that was their reality. They believed it was real. And everyone there who was there knew that this was not real, and that these people were unwell. And hopefully we were able to get them the right help and got them sorted. All right. So we must understand that. I just had to put that in there. So our imagination allows us to scrutinize our past. We can wind back the clock. All right. All right, we can wind. And yeah, you said your mom suffered from this. Well, so sorry to hear that. Hope she's well now. So with our imaginations, we can wind back the clock. We can go into our past and wind back the clock. All right, with our imaginations, we can go into the future. So with our imaginations, we can explore our past. We can go into the future. We can construct hypothetical scenarios about the future, a future that we want. We can create a mental picture of that future. We can empathize with other people. We can empathize with people that when we watch movies or we listen to the news. Listen, I'm not sure my wife is here, but my wife, my God, she has wild imaginations when she's watching movies. I'm not sure whether there are other people here who like running commentaries when you watch movies. Oh God, I've got one at home. When watching movies, she would pray, she would sing, she would scream, as if this movie, even a movie that we've seen over and over again, she's still so in it. She'll be feeling it. What about the 6 o'clock news? Oh, 6 o'clock news, you will see her jumping and so I'm like, oh my God, calm down, calm down. This movie is not real life. Let's not pray. She likes pray. All right. But that's what our imagination does. It allows us to fill in gaps, fill in knowledge gaps with our imagination. We can fill in the gaps. All right. With our imagination, we can generate new insights. Okay. We can generate insight. We can fill in the gaps. Now let's fill in the gap with this. Let us fill in the gap with this. Quickly, quickly. What do you think this is? What image is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? Fill in this gap. Quickly, quickly, quickly. Yeah, no, let's put on the answers to the question. What is this? Someone said a leopard. Can they? Well, thank you. More. All righty. Map of the world. Interesting. An animal. Oh, Violet Oshidele. Wow. Good to see you. Cheetah. Give me. What is this? What do you think this is? Come on, come on. Please, we need to be organized here. Let's go one by one. The comments, please. It's jumping animal. Yeah. Okay, I can just see it in a dog. Someone said a dog. A dog. Leopard. All right. All right. Map of a continent. Wow. Map of a continent. Fill in the gaps. Fill in the gap. What is this? A greyhound. A greyhound. You're very close. A greyhound. All right. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Where's the team? Team, please just keep going, please. There's no point waiting. A cow. Wow. Look at our imagination. We're filling in the gap. You're filling in the gap. Filling in the gap. All right. Let me just put the answer there. Someone already put it there. Okay. So let's just leave it there. A Dalmatian. Yeah. No. Don't just put it back there. The Dalmatian. Okay. Wow. That is it. That is it. Now look at all the options we had, from the map of the world to a cow to any animal to a greyhound and different. And I know all of you are still putting in different options. Okay. How did you do that? Your imagination. So what you did in your mind was to compare this image with the references of what you had. So you had to go to your memory, your long-term memory, to compare this image, and you filled in the gap in your mind, depending on what you perceived, or depending on your experience, what you've seen. And if you have seen a Dalmatian, or you own one, or you watch movies about one, you probably would jump at that. And for you, if you're, someone said leopard, yeah, maybe, if you can fill in the gap. So you fill in with what it is, whatever you want. See, that's why it's very difficult sometimes. I'm not sure. I watched a documentary on Netflix. Some of you would have watched it, on the Innocence Project. And it talked about so many people that have been convicted and sent to jail for life by eyewitness testimony, no DNA evidence. So most of these people are now being freed by DNA. And that's because somebody said they saw them commit a crime. And sometimes a lot of these people who are witnesses would, based on the time it takes to process law, this kind of cases, lawyers in the house, you know what I'm talking about. Some of these cases can take months to years. So by the time a witness comes to the stand to tell a story, their memory decays with time. Every memory decays with time. And as memory decays with time, we fill in the gaps. And if you're presented with a potential suspect And the detective says, "We think this person did it. Did you see this person?" And if they are not very careful, which is what happened in the 60s and in the 70s in the United States, especially for some of those cops who were racist, and some of them were just frankly incompetent in the United States. What they did was to set up these witnesses who mostly innocently accused or testified against innocent people, filling in the gap. Yeah, I saw a black man, but come on, there are many black men in the neighborhood. This must be the black man. Why? He has a, he's done time before. He has a bad record, and so you fill in the gap. And can you imagine that if this was a suspect, and I have five different witnesses, somebody has filled in the gap and called this a cow. Somebody says this is just a map. Someone says this is a dog. Someone called this a greyhound. Someone else has called this a demulsion. So I can have five or six suspects who would then interpret that in different ways because in your own mind, you fill in the gap. So if you know that, well, the most likely person to commit this crime is a black person who has been to jail before, who has boggled homes before, or who has done this before, and you're presented with a witness that fits in that profile, whether it is him or not, your mind subconsciously fills in that gap and you imagine that man's face, you superimpose that man's face on what profile you have, and it makes sense. And you convince yourself innocently that that person is guilty. You come on stand and you swear that that man did it. And the man goes to jail until DNA sets him free 40 years later. So easy. Because and this sort of feeds into the bias that we talk about, which our minds do all the time. And there are a lot of people in jail right now who are in jail because of someone's innocent testimony. All right. And we see this over and over again. So our memories decay. And when our memories decay, what do? We fill in the gaps based on our past experience, based on the narrative that we want to tell. All right. At that time. Let me quickly tell you about this man that I really have spent some time listening to. Sorry, reading about. All right. This young man, amazing young man that, a lot of us would know that I've read about his story. I was like, wow, this young man studied engineering and physics in the 1870s without a degree. Come on, self taught engineer, self taught physicist, an amazing young man. And he had something special about him. He had the power of visualization. He had the power of visualization. He will visualize his constructions and augment them in his mind's eye, even without any physical drawing. All right. He would initially, when he conceives a product, he will mentally map that product in all its dimensions with before putting pen to paper. And if you tell him an item, I can just mention the name of an item, he could envision the item in realistic detail. All right. This man was a visionary. All right. Nikola Tesla. All right, Nikola Tesla. He visualized every invention in his mind with extreme precision, including all the dimensions, even before moving to the construction stage. And he pioneered a technique called picture thinking, thinking in pictures. Right. This man had a photographic memory. He read so many books. In fact, he memorized so many textbooks. Never went to school, never had a university degree. Nikola Tesla, self-taught himself engineering, but his imagination was so vivid and so powerful, so powerful. Some people have such powerful visual mental imagery. This man spoke 8 languages, but then he was socially awkward. Do you know that he never got married, never had children, never owned his own house, lived in hotels? For most of his adult life in New York, he lived from one hotel to the other, from one hotel to the other. Sometimes some of these geniuses have weird personalities, isn't it? A little bit of craziness that sometimes allows them to really flourish, especially creative geniuses. All right. This was a young boy who left Serbia, born in Serbia, left Europe, migrated when he was in his early 20s, migrated to the United States, self-taught himself, worked in an electricity company, Thomas Edison's company, and then started his own work. And he pioneered a lot of stuff on the electricity, on the transmission of electricity. Of course, his main rival was Thomas Edison. all right, where you previously worked for. They did a lot of great stuff, and of course, we know what the Tesla brand is right now, but that's not connected to him though. But it's still a recognition and an acknowledgement of this man. So people that are currently, I'm working on a project with one of our one of the top neuro leadership experts in Australia, and we're working on a project called neurodiversity. So we're looking at neurodiversity and really exploring that. And I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of emails from parents about their children, that, yeah, my children have special needs. Some of them are on the autistic spectrum. Some of these children have ADHD. And there's so many questions I get all the time. And one of my this collaborator of mine told me that what spurred her on this journey of neurodiversity was a young 12-year-old son who was in just 13-year-old son who was in high school, and this boy is so gifted, but then of course is socially awkward and will get into trouble at times. But the boy is so talented. She said to me that one weekend, this boy just memorized all the major cities in the United States, and all the states within the United States and their capital. So he could tell every major city in every state, all the 52 states of the United States. He did the same thing for Australia. He lives in Sydney here. And this boy was within a weekend, he just memorized all of that, and he could reproduce it to you. He can already speak 5 languages, and he wants to break the world record for a multilingualist, which is 32 languages. He wants to be able to speak 32 languages fluently. He's just in his early teens, and he can speak 5 languages: Norwegian, English, and Spanish. And she was telling me, "It's like, we've got a genius here, but then he's socially awkward." And he's got what we call a hyperfixation syndrome, which is one of the manifestations of ADHD. He's hyperfixated, so he can stay in one corner and fixate on something, and you can never move. He can spend 20 hours on it, absorbing every single detail about that thing. All right. And I'm like, yeah, we've got these amazing geniuses, but people don't understand them. They can't get into the workplace because they fail interviews. They're awkward. They can't make eye contact. They're shy. They're reclusive. They find it difficult to work in a team. They find it difficult to get jobs. And except they have a breakthrough like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. All these people, they're different. Imagine you employing Elon Musk. You will sack him within a few weeks because he's awkward. He's a genius, but it'll be hard to work with in a team. But not everybody would be like that. So how do we help these kids? How do we empower teachers? How do we train them so they can help kids, empower these kids? How can they coach them when they go for their interviews? How can we coach them when they're going on their first date? So they can engage and they can have a good life and they can enjoy themselves and they can be part of society. How can we train their managers to operate them into their workplaces? So that people like Nikola Tesla, what he did not have was this. He was a neurodiverse kid. He was an awkward kid who lived alone all his life in a hotel room, never married, did not have a social life, lived in the hotel all his life, no connection, but still yet a great genius. A great genius. All right. I've no doubt in my mind that Nikola Tesla probably had ADHD and was on the autistic spectrum. All right. And that's one of my projects. And I'll be having a webinar on this. Myself and Kristen Hansen will be having a webinar on this. So we're going to be sharing. If you're not on my mailing list, please join my mailing list. We're going to be having a webinar in October next month. All right. It's going to be initially a free webinar, then we have a paid one. There'll be a free short webinar on neurodiversity. And recognizing the patterns. I see a lot of adults who are coming to me now with ADHD. All right. And they're not performing well, they're disorganized, they're highly functioning and all that, and they can do well in certain areas, but they're just disorganized. Their relationships are breaking up. They're losing their jobs. They can't keep a job. They're talented, but employers can't employ them. They look unreliable. It's just because employers don't understand them. Nobody gets them. All right, they are impulsive. They are and they can be hyper fixated. But oftentimes, for employers, it's all about the bottom line. Now, let me get back to this. Let me get back. Let's leave Nikola Tesla. But I hope you got something from that. Okay. So the two central features of imagination. all right, that I want to quickly talk about. Number one is that imagination is independent of stimulus. Imagination is independent of stimulus. Shout out to my very good friend Samuel Ekundaya. I think I saw Samuel Ekundaya on the screen recently, but yeah, shout out to you. So imagination is independent of stimulus, and imagination is limitless. So these are two things I want to really talk about. Imagination is independent of stimulus, and imagination is limitless. Okay, let's just explore this. So, firstly, imagination is independent of stimulus. Stimulus independent. All right. Now, let me bring this to your attention and just talk about very quickly imagination, our imagination versus our perception. This is very important, very crucial. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do something now. I want you to do something now. I want you to imagine a red apple. Just wherever you're right now, just imagine a red apple. Imagine a red apple. Have you imagined it? You can picture what it looks like. Don't bite it yet. Don't eat it. Don't eat it. Just imagine it. Just imagine it. Okay. Now take a bite. Take a bite of the red apple. Ah, yeah. Can you feel the juice? You feel. Do you hear the crunching sound? Can you hear the crunching sound? Just bite it. Yeah, you hear the crunching sound, and then you feel the juice. Yes. Well, you've just imagined the red apple, and you've just imagined. And thank you for eating it. You've just imagined a red apple, and you've bitten into the red apple. Fair enough. So that's imagination. You've imagined it. Okay. What if I showed you an apple? Now you're not imagining this. You're seeing it. This is real. It's an apple. This is real. So you're perceiving this right now. You're not imagining this. You're seeing it. You're engaging your senses. You're engaging your science of sight to see this. Now, the main difference between perception and imagination, there are a few differences, but I'll start with this. Perception requires contact, direct contact. So you only perceive something that comes in direct contact, all right, with your senses. For you to perceive this apple, you've had to see this apple. But guess what? Imagination does not require contact. You don't have to see something to imagine it. You don't have to see this apple to imagine it. You've imagined it already. You've even eaten this apple. You've seen yourself biting the apple. So, imagination, whilst perception requires contact, imagination does not require contact. There's no direct connection between your perception and imagination in that sense. So you don't need to see something before you can imagine it. Perception would depends on your environment, but imagination does not. So you can think of an object, even if it's shrouded in mist or is hidden in a soundproof room. As you're here right now, I'm not asking you to rob a bank, but you can picture what a vault would look like and just imagine gold and lots of money in the vault of a bank. You can imagine it. And if we were to paint on a canvas what a vault would look like, and I get 10 out of all of us here, we will paint a vault separately, differently. Some of you will go back to what you've seen. If you've watched Ocean 11 or one of those ocean movies, you can paint on the canvas what you think a bank's vault will look like. And some of you who have not seen a bank's vault before, you just conjure something up and draw what you think a bank's vault will be like. But you don't need contact. You don't need to be in a bank vault for you to imagine what it will be like. But you can only perceive what you're in contact with. You cannot but do that. Imagination does not require contact. Okay, so perception depends on the environment, but imagination does not. So imagination, the fact that imagination is stimulus independent means that we can imagine objects in their absence. We can imagine events that have not occurred. That's why you can pick, that's why from the first day you enter college, you can imagine your graduation day, even though that event has not occurred. It's because your imagination does not require contact. Your imagination does not depend on your environment. That's why even if you don't have any money in your pocket, you can dream that one day you'll be able to afford, to feed other people. You can imagine that. There was a day when I was in high school where I had problems talking. I had problems with my tenses, and sometimes I still do. If you listen well enough, you probably pick some of my grammatical bumps. Hopefully, not too many. All right. But I was very timid. I was reclusive. I was shy. I was pusillanimous. I was I would stay there in the corner. I was very shy when I was in high school and when I just got to college. because I just couldn't speak good English. I couldn't connect my tenses together. I had problems with is, was, are, where. So I just keep quiet. I knew I was intelligent, but I just couldn't express myself, and I had low self-esteem. I couldn't stand before a crowd to talk. But look at me here doing webinars. Okay. But one day, I remember I used to imagine as a kid, I was 14. I was 15 when I got to college. So I was quite young. I was the youngest in class. And I just used to, I would sit down there and I would imagine that one day I would stand before lots and lots of people and I would talk and I would not be shy. And you know what? That pushed me on. That pushed me on. I would go after college, after classes to a library. A library was next to the college, our classroom. I would go there and I studied the dictionary. Even though I was studying, my course was computer science. I would study the dictionary and I would listen to. I remember studying every speech that Martin Luther King wrote. Every speech of Martin Luther King, I read every speech of Martin Luther King. And I memorized lines, and I would stand before the mirror, and I would just rehearse, and I'll rehearse, and I'll rehearse. And when on Sunday I volunteered in our church to teach the children, I said, okay, well, the best way to practice my speaking is to teach kids. All right. Some of them will laugh if they get me get me say something incorrect, but at least they won't judge me because they like me. All right. I started teaching young kids, little kids, and I started teaching maths to young kids. All right, because I was very good in maths. All right. And by tutoring these kids, I just became more confident, more confident. But I used to picture it in my mind that one day I'll stand before a sea of white people. I was still living in Africa, and I imagine standing before a picture, group of white people talking. Guess what? In 2016, I won an award in the United States, and they flew me all the way to Phoenix, Arizona. They put me in this massive resort in Arizona, and I was there, the keynote speaker. I was a PhD student, but my research was groundbreaking that brought me in there. And they introduced me and read my bio, introduced me onto the stage. Almost 1,000 people. Were only two black people there in that room. And I stood there and I remember that dream. I remember I'd seen this before. It was like deja vu. And I just was searching my brain. Where did I see this? I saw it when I was in high school. I saw it when I could not speak. And look at me here. I'm not just speaking, I'm speaking to intelligent people. I'm speaking to a room full of neurologists from all over the world. And I'm talking about high-end research. I'm talking about novel findings from my PhD research. I'm like, yeah, dreams can come true. But when I pictured it, I'd never been in the company of a white person. When I was a young kid, picturing and imagining that the dream. And I kept that dream there over and over again. And it spurred me on. That even though I was in the midst of intense poverty, even though life was difficult, even though my family life was hard, even though I didn't have a school bag, even though I didn't have school shoes, I only had one pair of pants and I could not speak English. And I was the youngest, shortest, and whatever. In the midst of all those constraints, nothing could keep my dream because imaginations are independent of your environment. Nothing could stop me. Throughout my first year in college, I had no breakfast. I would beg on the streets to get transport fare to go to college. And I was a 15-year-old going to school, knocking on doors in the neighborhood to ask for transport fare, or going to the bus stop and asking the driver to please carry me, lift me up, take me, transport me to the next destination for free. And I would do that every single day for a year because my dad was not around at the time. But that could not kill that picture in my mind. I knew it. I could see that I was going somewhere. Nothing was going to stop that dream. I painted the kind of picture, the future I wanted, and it was so clear, so vivid in my mind that even when I could not speak English, when I could not afford breakfast or lunch, when I had no textbooks, when I had no notebooks, when I had no clothes, it did not matter. Your imagination cannot be killed, cannot be hindered, cannot be stifled by your environment, except you allow it. So, whilst your perception depends on your environment, your imagination does not. Does not. And that's one thing that you must understand. Let me go fast in the interest of time. But some people struggle with their imagination. And I've said it that some people can't produce mental images. So if I asked you the other time to imagine an apple, biting into an apple, on a scale of 1 to 5, some of you would have had this. Maybe some of you some of you could not have even pictured what an apple would look like. Whereas some of you would have a vivid picture of what an apple would look like. And you would even enjoy the sensory experience of biting into an apple. Let me tell you about this young man, Blake Ross. Blake Ross is the co-founder of Mozilla Firefox, one of the web browsers, software engineer, and he worked for Facebook for a time. He read an article about a condition called aphantasia, the absence of fantasy, which is the inability to form mental pictures. It doesn't mean lack of imagination. No one has that. But in his own imaginations, he could not form pictures. He could form only mental narratives. Look at what he said. Let me read to you what he said. He said, if I tell you, I'm just reading an extract from his Facebook post. He read an article on the New York Times, and then he posted this on Facebook about his problems, his inability to form visual images. Let me read it. It says, if I tell you to imagine a beach, you can picture the golden sand and the turquoise waves. If I ask for a red triangle, your mind gets to drawing. And if I ask you for your mom's face, of course, you can picture your mom's face. You experience this differently. Sure, some of you are photorealistic. You see a photorealistic beach. Others will see a shadowy cartoon. Some of you can make it up. Others only see a beach they've visited. Some of you have to work harder to paint the canvas. Some of you can't even hang on to the canvas for long, but nearly all of you have a canvas. You can paint on that canvas what a beach looks like. He said, I don't. I have never visualized anything in my entire life. I can't see my father's face. I can't see a bouncing blue ball. I can't even picture my childhood bedroom or the run I went on 10 minutes ago. I thought counting sheep was a metaphor. I am 30 years old and I've never known a human who could do any of this. And it's blowing my mind. If you tell me to imagine a beach, I ruminate on the concept of a beach. I know there's sand. I know there's water. I know there's a sun and maybe a lifeguard. I know the facts about the beach. I know a beach when I see it, and I can do verbal gymnastics with the word itself, but I cannot flash to beaches I have visited. I have no visual, audio, emotional, or sensory experience that I can relieve. I have no capacity to create any kind of mental image of a beach, whether I close my eyes or I open them. Whether I'm reading the word in a book or concentrating on the idea for hours at a time, or whether I'm standing on the beach itself. And I grew up in Miami. That's interesting, isn't it? Aphantasia. Now, what is important here is that it is true about 2% of the population, about 2% of the people right here on the skull would have nothing, no experience. When I told you to look at the apple, you just don't have the capacity to picture the apple and can be frustrated. And you know what? You're not any different because you don't know any different. And for him, it took him 30 years to realize that when someone says picture something, that they can actually picture it. And he never was able to picture it. But he was still able to have a mental narrative. So his own imaginations were mostly in words, not in pictures, but there's still imagination. So as I said, imagination is not just all about mental images or pictures. Imagination is also about the narrative, all right, the story that goes with it. And for some people, that's what really happens. But just back to what I said earlier, that our imaginations are disconnected from senses. So whilst your perception relies on what you sense, you see this apple, you perceive this apple. You need to come into contact with this apple through your senses, whether you see it, you smell it, you taste it, you touch it, you feel it, whatever it is. All right, you perceive it that way. But with the imagination, it doesn't necessarily work that way. All right, the imagination works in a different way. And let me tell you, creatures that have a capacity for imagination can control the environment in a way that a creature that is reliant on perception cannot. And I like this, the picture of the croc in the Serengeti. I tell the story a lot because I like nature, documentaries, about Africa and all that. So you see the wilder beast here, being mauled by the crocs. The crocs know exactly when the wildebeest will go through their annual migration, crossing the river. They position themselves. They're able to, picture it before it even happens. They're well positioned. They're well, so a predator with perception can only detect prey when they're around, because perception requires contact. Imagination does not require contact. A predator with imagination can think about the prey, expect them, attract them, and plan for their arrival. All right. So people who have not learned to harness the capacity of their imagination cannot control their environment. Secondly, imagination is limitless. See, our perception is limited. You cannot see everything. You cannot hear everything. You cannot be everywhere. You cannot be in contact with everyone. But the reach of your imagination is practically unlimited. That's just the truth. You cannot see objects that are so small, that are microscopic. You cannot hear sounds that are very high in pitch. And you cannot detect odors that are very faint. But you can imagine objects that are far removed from you in space and time. You can imagine things that are so small, like subatomic particles. You can imagine subatomic particles. You can think about things that are so large. You can think about massive stars. You can think about Pluto. You can think about Venus. You can imagine it. You can imagine things that are far away, like Mars, planet Mars. We can think about it. And when you watch those movies about Mars, don't you travel with them to Mars in the space shuttle or in the spacecraft? You can think about things that are so near to you. You can think about your brain. You can think about your brain, even though you would never see it. You can think about the things that happened in the past. You can think about it. For those of you who are people of faith, Christian faith, you can think about Jesus. Those of you who are Muslim faith, you can think about Muhammad. You can think about those people, even though you've never seen them. You can think about things that will happen in the future. You can think about the next Olympic Games that will happen in Paris. When is it now? Is it next year? Yeah, maybe. I think there's one next year or the year, whatever. You can think about the next Olympic Games. It hasn't happened yet. So our imagination is limitless. And where was the seat of our imagination? Our imagination exists within the brain's mental workspace. You see, the brain's mental workspace is that neural network that coordinates the activities across several regions of our brains and consciously manipulates symbols and images and words and ideas. And that's what's responsible for our imagination. Okay, I'm going with a bit of speed right now because I've got a few more things to talk about in the interest of time. Different types of imagination. All right, and then I'll finish up with enhancing your imagination. So stay with me, don't go yet. All right. Different types of imagination. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to simplify it, and I'm only going to talk about three different types of imagination. Okay. We can talk about creative imagination, we can talk about fantasy, and then I'll talk about empathy. Okay. So creative imagination, creative imagination. All right. Creative imagination is the ability that we have to combine existing knowledge. It's similar to combinational creativity that I talked about in my last webinar. If you've not watched the webinar, you can go to the still on this YouTube channel, just scroll down in the video section and you will see that the neuroscience of creativity. So combining existing knowledge and information in a novel way, breaking down the rules of conventional thinking and finding new solutions to problems. That is what creative imagination is. It's the type of imagination that helps us produce original ideas, innovative work of art, science, technology. That's it. Creative imagination. Yeah. All right. I won't spend too much time on that. What about fantasy? Fantasy involves creating imaginary scenarios, characters, events, all right, that are different from our reality. Different from our reality. Different from our reality. So it's a type of imagination that helps us escape from reality and we enter into this world of our own making. All right, fantasy. And we do that a lot. We fantasy, is a sort of entertainment and pleasure for those who do a lot of daydreaming. For others, it helps them to cope. It's a kind of imagination that takes us away from our pain. And when I was seeing myself, you know, talking and speaking in a large audience and doing great stuff, even though my reality was different at the time, I was priming myself for that future. And I was using that to extract and stretch my mind and extract the resources that I need. Like I was using that to activate the depths within me so I can pursue my goal. So, daydreaming, which is a form of fantasy, can be effective at times. It can be very, very good. And if you watch my webinar on the neuroscience of creativity, I talk about daydreaming. Now, some people take things to the extreme, like every good thing can go be taken to the extreme. And some people have what they call a fantasy personality disorder, where they will not go to work, they will not do anything. They're just there fantasizing, daydreaming, and with no life, no goals. Sorry, not working towards their goals and all that. No, I'm not talking about that. And I'm not talking about fantasies that do not have the capacity to come to pass. All right, like I said earlier on, you just sitting somewhere for 1 hour imagining that you're dating Princess Diana. Where is that going to take you? Nowhere. When you're done, you'll be back. Let's look at the case of this man, this very interesting character. Some of you will know him, Mr. Homer. All right, he finds himself an idle moment alone with his thoughts because he was feeling unsuccessful, unappreciated. He embarks on this daydream, seeing himself as rich and famous. He sees himself building muscle, and then he becomes a superstar. And then he sees himself being applauded by the crowd. He becomes a runway model, even becomes an astronaut in space. Everything. All right. And then he sails in a yacht. He becomes a US president. He lives in a mansion. He buys a sports car. But then, of course, he wakes up and is still the same old man. Same old man. Sorry, just give me a second, please. Yeah, same old man. All right. So, what about empathy or empathic imagination? This is a type of imagination that helps us understand and relate to other people's feelings, their thoughts, and their perspectives. Listen, without imagination, there can be no empathy. Without imagination, we cannot empathize with others. Without imagination, because it takes imagination to understand, relate with other people, put ourselves, not feel sorry for them, not sympathy, not feel sorry for them, but to put ourselves in their shoes and share their feelings and their thoughts. Without imagination, you cannot cry when you watch a movie. Without imagination, every fundraising campaign for suffering children will attract no funds because you just can't put yourself in their shoes. Advertisers will struggle without imagination. If we had no imagination, then how would they sell to us? Or how would they convince us or pull on our heartstrings? Okay. So empathic imagination involves us seeing ourselves in someone else's situation and imagining how someone else will feel or think in a given situation. And one of the things we're beginning to understand from a neurobiological point of view are the mirror neurons, okay? And we still don't understand this fully, but we're beginning to see that mirror neurons may have a role to play in the social interaction, particularly when it comes to empathy. And it was first noticed among monkeys. So monkeys were being um, um, investigated in a particular research setting, and they found that every time the monkey picked up an apple, the mirror neurons will fire, all right, or pick up a fruit, the mirror neurons will fire. But later they realized that the mirror neurons were firing when the monkey was not picking up the object, well, when the observer, the researcher, was picking up the object. So that means that when we observe other people, we may actually experience, all right, the same brain waves. We may generate the same brainwaves through observation of other people, and it's much more complex than this. So mirror neurons cannot explain all about empathy, but they give us a window into this. Interestingly, from my old notes, I write notes. Sorry, this is my handwriting. Doctor's handwriting's not very good. I apologize, but I just couldn't type it out, so I just took a screenshot of a study that was done by David et al. In 1999, and what they found that newborn infants cry louder in the in the neonatal unit, so in the hospital where they're newborns cry louder when they hear another infant cry than when they hear their own recorded cry or a chimpanzee infant. So what these researchers did was to play in at night within the neonatal unit. They played the sound of a chimpanzee infant, They play the sound of the baby's own cry, the individual baby's cry, to test each of the babies, and then you know, they also allow them to listen to other infants crying. And if you've worked, I have worked when I was an intern in a neonatal unit. Once one baby starts to cry, everyone starts to cry. They just connect. It's like a symphony, like an orchestra. Okay. And that's it. They share that bond. There's something that connects with the other person. Okay. They can share their pain. And let me just move on now in the interest of time. So, how can we enhance our imagination? All right, how can we do this? Okay, before we talk about enhancing imagination, I just need to paint to you a portrait of what you stand to get. What would be the outcome if you enhance your imagination? Would you get out of this? Number one, it would improve your perception. Number two, it will improve your creativity and problem solving, your memory and learning. If you want to improve your learning, that's something that you can get out of it. If you want to form new habits, imagination can be used. Enhancing your imagination can help you form new habits. It can also help you mature emotionally. So you see, there are a lot of benefits that you stand to gain by following me with this journey. So let me just quickly talk about improving perception. Our imagination can help improve our perception. We know imagination is different from perception, but you can use your imagination to improve your perception about how you see the world and how you can perceive things and how you can sense your environment, how you can generate insights from your environment, how you can find problems and how you can find solutions, your perception of your environment. Remember that perception depends on your environment and perception depends on exposure. All right. So who can tell me what this is? In the comments, comment. What is this? What can you see? What is this image? It's a very common one. I just wanted to use that to um what's this? What's this image? Quickly. Wow. Good. Someone said two hungry men. Well, can you see anything else? What else can you see? Can you see anything else? What is this? What is this image? Tell me what you can see. Oh, someone says a cup. Yeah. Another one says a verse. Yes. Okay, so you can see a verse. You can see, yeah. Well, it depends on what what you perceive. It depends on what comes to you. So you see, you can perceive different things. All right. So what you sense, what you see is processed into an image. And for some of you, you would not have seen the verse until someone else called it out. And some of you would not have seen the faces until someone called it out. So when we perceive things, our perception goes through three stages. We select from all our sensations because we can't process all our sensations. Like if you look at my screen right now, if you look at me right now, you would notice that there are a lot of things in the background. There are a lot of things in the background, and you've probably been seeing them, but you've not perceived them. So to see something doesn't mean that you perceive them. All right. To see something does not mean that you perceive them. Now that I've enlarged my screen, maybe you can see a few things. You can see the brain model in the background. You can see the brain model there. All right. You can see, all right, a picture frame there with daddy. You can see some books. You can see the map of the world. All right, here. And that's North America. All right. Now I'm pointing you to different things that you can see. And now you can perceive. So when you perceive something, it means that it comes to the center of your attention. But if you don't perceive it, you can still see it, but it stays in the background. It's not noticeable. You don't select it. That's the point. So to perceive something is to select. So when we perceive, our brain selects it out, we organize it, and then we interpret it. We give it meaning. Okay. So now this is one of my favorite cars, man. I love this car. I love a Mazda CX-3, and I have one of this. It's my everyday commute. It's easy to park, easy to drive, fuel efficient, and I can squeeze it in anywhere that I want to. All right. Now, the very moment I bought this car, because I liked it and I thought about it hard, the moment I decided that yes, I was going to get a CX-3, okay, I started seeing it everywhere. And I'm sure that you've had the same experience. Once you imagine something enough, all right, it affects your perception of that thing. Maxter did not create more CX3s, all right? Maxter did not create more CX3s at the time. Not really. I just started selecting them out more and more and more. My perception of CX3s changed. When you imagine something, you start to see it more, you start to select it more. So it pops out from the background. I probably would have been seeing a lot of CX3s when I drive and move around, but I wasn't selecting them because my capacity for selection is limited. Otherwise, you go crazy. You cannot be exposed, and you cannot, even if you're exposed, you cannot process all the information that your brain is exposed to. So your brain selects the things that are really important. And once you start imagining something, that is a cue for your brain that this is important. You give your brain the cue that yes, this is important. So it comes up, it pops up, it pops up. That's why if you want to do a project, you start meeting people that are in the same, that have the same ideas. You go online and you start meeting people, all right? You start connecting with people, all right? In that same sense, you start attract. So very important to understand that by enhancing your imagination and you can improve your perception. All right. Let me give you another task. Quickly. This is another quick task. Okay. Quickly. All right. Which of these light blue circles is bigger? A or B? A or B? Which of the light blue circles is bigger? You know, the center circle, the light blue circle. Which one do you think is bigger? A or B? Quickly put it in the chat. Let me see. I want some engagement. I want some engagement. Quickly, whether you're on YouTube, you're on LinkedIn, you're on Facebook. So which one is bigger, A or B? Adeomi says A. Good. A. Fan says A. Quickly, let's go on. Oh, Julius, A. Wow, A as one. Wow. Everybody's saying A. Everyone's saying A. Is there any B? Is there any B? Does anybody think it's B? Temitope says the same. Itunu says it's a B. Well, they're the same size. Yes, Temitope is correct. They're the same size. They are the same size. Why? Perception. Because this A is surrounded by smaller circles, it looks bigger than it is. Is that not what happens to you, that when you're surrounded by people that are not as intelligent or as connected or as endowed as you are, you feel bigger than you really are? And the imposter syndrome that happens to us at work, when we are surrounded by people that we consider to be geniuses, we look smaller than we really are. That's B. That's perception. This the same picture, the same image, but your perception of its size is confounded by the environment. You interpret the size of the bowl based on the environment. That's what happens to you. You know how good you are, but you're at work, and because everybody's a genius and everybody's great, you start to doubt yourself. You start to feel it happens. It happens to me. It's happened to me many times where I just feel like, am I not bright anymore? Don't I know this anymore? Why am I starting to doubt myself? Why am I starting to do this and that? Okay, but then you may run in the you may run into the trouble of also overestimating your capacity and not stretching yourself, just being a local champion where everybody will adore you and you're the person everyone will come to for problems and everything, and you may feel pompous and proud because you look bigger than you really are. It's perception. Okay, now our brain is able to organize things. So when you perceive something, your brain organizes it. So you perceive that blue ball and then you organized it. But how did you organize it? You organized it based on what was around it. And so you imagined it based on what was around it. Okay, then I can't spend too much time on this right now. Let me go to the next one, interpretation. We're talking about perception. Your imagination can improve your perception. Now, you can see there's a goalpost there. I'm not going to give you a task, but I'll just tell you a quick research that was done by a team of researchers in the United States called the WIT Profit Team Research Team. And what they did was that they got a couple of a couple of people to to kick a penalty. Okay, so kick the ball into the net. All right. So they got them to kick, and so they had a group of people to kick the ball into the net. For those that were successful, those that successfully kicked the ball in the net, They put them in one group, and those that were not successful, they put them in another group. After that, they asked those that were successful to estimate the size of the goalpost. How big is the goalpost? And they asked those that were unsuccessful to do the same thing, to exercise, sorry, to imagine and to estimate the size of the goalpost. What do you think the outcome was? Those that were successful goal kickers thought the goalpost was larger than it was. They overestimated it. They thought the goalpost was larger than it really was. Those that were successful. And those that were unsuccessful thought the goalpost was smaller than it really was because they were unsuccessful. Are you getting my point here? All right. Now, their imagination of the size of the goalpost colored their perception of it based on their experience. I don't have too much time because I want to really um, explore the things. But take it from me, you can improve your perception by enhancing your imagination. You can also improve your creativity and problem solving ability. Imagination can help us solve problems by allowing us to think outside the box and come up with creative solutions. And we can do that by visualizing different scenarios and outcomes and identify potential obstacles and develop strategies to overcome these obstacles. So, imagination can help us generate new ideas. We can do that. I like this. If you've listened to me before, you'd have heard me talk about this counterclockwise experiments. So, in the first panel here of this old man looking at the mirror, actually, that just depicts the experiment that was. This was a real experiment, all right. And the author, the main researcher, was Ellen Langer, and she actually wrote a book about that counterclockwise. All right. So what they did in this experiment was that they got three groups of people who were in their 80s. So they got three groups of people in their 80s and they put them into different scenarios. So group one, they told them to live normal like they do for a week. So whether they were in nursing homes, they were in aged care facilities, or they were in their own homes with their family or with their relatives, just live your life normally for a week. Group one, no change, live like an 80-year-old will live in that time. Group two, what they told them to do was to stay in your homes, stay where you are in your aged care facilities, wherever it is. But we want you for 1 week to reminisce about what life was like for you in your 60s. So for 1 week, they gave them mental tasks that would generate imagination about their lives 20 years earlier in their 60s. So for that week, they were involved in a lot of activities that would generate um, memories of the past, of life, of how life was, how agile they were, how connected they were, how some of them were still working in their 60s. And so it was all about, reactivating that. And for those in the third group, they said, oh, they took them away from their homes and they put them to retrofitted homes that looked like their homes 20 years ago. So they researched each of those people in the third group and took them back to their homes if they could find it. If they could not find their actual homes, they retrofitted homes for them that looked like the homes where they lived 20 years ago. So for that 1 week, they were living like they were doing 20 years prior. All right. And they took away their walking aids, they took away their visual aids. All right. Like if they didn't have them 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, they were not with a walking stick, they took them away from them. Of course, there were some safety measures there. And even they asked them to carry their luggage, their own luggage, to their bedroom. Some of them, of course, struggled with this. And then, of course, at the end of 1 week, they analyzed group one, group two, group three. Group one lived as normal. Group two lived in their same condition, but they were reminiscing about their life 20 years ago. And group three lived in different conditions, retrofitted homes. And what they found was that at the end of 1 week, group three showed significant improvements in their visual acuity and in their musculoskeletal coordination after 1 week. Group two, as well, despite the fact that they did not leave their homes, they showed significant improvements. Not as much as group one, and of course, group, you know, sorry, not as much as group three. And then, of course, group one was the same. They were just the same. Very interesting research here, all right, about the counterclockwise experiments, all right, and how by using your imagination, look at those people in group two. just by using their imagination, they could do a lot of things in terms of their cognition and all that. Same thing with memory and learning. Imagination can help us solve problems. Imagination can help us. So I'm going very fast now because of time. Imagination can help us with problem solving. I was reading this research. I tried to bring in a bit of research there so that what I'm saying is not just empty. And what we do know is that science, the research has shown us how powerful imagination can be in memory and in learning. And in fact, in this particular study, all right, one volunteers were asked to play a sequence of piano notes for 5 days. So they asked them to play a note for 5 days. All right, they had two groups. So play a particular note for 5 days, and the other group was asked to just imagine it. So one group was playing the piano notes, the other group was imagining it for 5 days. All right. And after that, they did some brain scans on them to check what the pattern of brain activation was. And interestingly, all right, what they found was that the pattern of brain activation was similar by day 5 for those that practiced physically and for those that had mental practice. Now, that doesn't mean that those that had mental practice will be more proficient. Of course not. But they were activating by imagining it, by they were priming themselves. All right, they were priming themselves. And there's something we call mental rehearsal, especially when you're learning a new skill. If you do a lot of mental rehearsal for a new skill, you are going to prime your brain because you're already activating those parts of the brain that will help you carry out that activity. And you're priming yourself, getting yourself ready. It makes execution easy. It makes it easy for you to go ahead with it. It leads me to habit formation as well, which is another thing. If you want to automate a good habit, all right, so you want to learn a new skill and you want to automate it, perfect it so that it happens spontaneously and it happens without effort, all right, you can do that. But you can use your imagination as well. You can leverage on the power of your imagination to be able to do that. For you to form a habit, I just want to quickly mention here that two things will determine how strong your habit would be. Number one is how context dependent is the habit. All right. If your habit is not dependent, does not depend on context, it's a strong habit. Very good example, brushing your teeth. How you brush your teeth is a habit and it may not depend on context. Doesn't matter whether you're at home, you're at the office, when you travel, when you go visiting someone, when you're on holiday, you brush your teeth most likely the same way. The way you handle the toothbrush, the way you do it, you probably do it the same way. So that's a habit that does not depend on context and it's very hard to change. So habits that don't depend on whether people are looking at you or whether you're at home or you're not are more likely to stay there for a long time. And if they're bad habits, they're going to be very hard to break. All right. And of course, when it comes to peak performance, if you automate behaviors in a way and you form non-contextual habits, they would last for a long time and they will help you perform at a very high level. That's what athletes do. They develop this routine, these habits that help them perform irrespective of the context. So whether they are performing their skill in a stadium that is full of 100,000 people or just in a small crowd, they're able to perform over and over and over again. It's not dependent on context. All right. Look at this footballer, Lionel Messi, who goes all over the world in different countries. He does the same thing. A lot of the way he kicks the ball and the way he moves with the ball as a footballer, they are non-contextual habits. It doesn't matter whether he's playing against a big team or small team. It's just there. It's hardwired in him. The other thing that will determine how strong your habit is how much resistance do you have to overcome in forming that habit. If you have to overcome a lot of resistance to form that habit, then that habit is likely to be strong. So if you, for example, you want to go to the gym at night, if you have to, if you feel tired and you're able to push through your tiredness to keep going to the gym at night, when it becomes a habit, it will be hard for you to let go. All right. But if you face a little resistance and you give up, face a little resistance and give up, even if you turn it into a habit, it will not be sustained. It will not be a strong habit. Strong habits are habits that we execute even when they are not convenient. All right. We go through, no matter the resistance, you push through. So when you feel a lot of resistance, when you're about to form a habit, or when you want to automate a skill, a good skill. So maybe you want to form a good habit of writing, of reading, all right, and you're starting and you're facing difficulty, lots of resistance. You better push through because if you can overcome that resistance consistently, all right, for a few weeks and then maybe a few months, and you're doing it, by the time you automate it, it will be so hardwired that it will be hard for you not to do it. And imagine you automating a healthy behavior, you will be good for it. Okay. So I wrote this in my notes. Sorry, I'm using my handwriting there for those who can read it. Habits are connected to our procedural memory, and this is where mental rehearsal is. All right. Our procedural memory requires imagination. To just imagine tying your shoelace. You can imagine it, isn't it? For those who don't have a fantasia, you can imagine putting on the shoe, taking the two laces, tying the knot, yeah, tying another knot. You can imagine doing that, okay? That's your procedural memory, okay? So it's encoded in your memory. Now, the sequence of steps we memorize in order to complete a task and achieve the outcome. So if you're thinking of adopting a new habit, I wrote in my notes, get into the mindset of procedural memory to overcome that barrier of limbic friction, which is the resistance. So if you want to go to the gym at night and you're feeling tired, and you're feeling worn out, before you jumping out of bed, why not just sit down and rehearse what you're going to do? All right. Have a mental rehearsal. I'm going to get up right now. I'm going to have a shower. I'm going to put on my clothes. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. By doing that already, you're activating your brain. All right. And you're activating your prefrontal cortex. You're selecting those neuronal networks that will help you perform. That's why most athletes, for example, before they go on to perform, they would relieve it, they would relieve it, they would visualize it. All right. It's a mental rehearsal. Okay. Let me quickly go on because of time. Emotions as well are very important. Emotional maturity, our imaginations can help our emotional development. I already hear our brain does not differentiate between fully felt, remembered, or imagined emotions. How many times have you remembered something in the past? All right, and you just imagine it and you feel it feels so real, and you scream and people are like, what happened? They're like, oh, no, no, sorry, nothing. It was just your imagination. Or how many times have you been imagining something and you're just smiling and you're having a good time? I've shared the story of my son before, who was in the shower in the morning, running late for school, and he was daydreaming, just looking up into the sky, smiling. I had to bang on the door, open the door, and I saw him staring into space and smiling. I was like, what's up? I hope you're not having a seizure. And he's like, oh, no, 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 no. On our way to school, I asked him what was going on. And he said, hey, Dad, I was imagining myself being a Japanese ninja. A Japanese ninja. For about 20 minutes, he was daydreaming, seeing himself as a Japanese ninja. He doesn't have any Japanese blood in himself. And he's not that agile. He's not going to be a ninja. But he was seeing himself as a superhero, destroying the, bad guys and, you know, being a good man. And it felt good. He imagined, but you know what? The brain does not differentiate. So between that reality and that emotion, it's still the same. Okay. All right. Before I now go into the strategies for enhancing, how to enhance your imagination, before going into the specifics of the strategy, that's the last part of this talk. I just want to let you know about this online course, The Neuroscience of Leadership and Peak Performance. All right. So if you can just write out that link, all right, bit.ly/neurolead course. All right. This will be a course that will transform your life, really. So we'll talk about in that when you enroll in the course, you will learn about the brain and how the brain relates to your leadership, how you can use the power of your brain to improve your leadership, to improve your own performance. So we'll talk about learning how to lead, expressing emotions, how you can adapt to change, and how you can develop high performance habits. All right. So I encourage you get that. I will be running for if you fill in that link today. If you register today, you get a 50% discount. You'll get a 50% discount. All right. It's only going to run for 24 hours. For 24 hours. For those of you on this call. So when we finish, make sure you register. I will still make a few more comments about this at the end. So the last part of my talk of this webinar. What are the strategies for enhancing imagination? Okay. I'll talk about this 6 things. Number one, whole brain goal setting. Whole brain goal setting. I'm going to tell you a new way of setting goals because it starts from the goals. It starts with your why. I'll talk about embracing constraints, identifying and challenging mental barriers. I'll talk about visualization exercises, creative activities, and how you can create an environment that fosters creativity. Okay. These are strategies, proven strategies that will help you enhance your imagination. All right. So this is it now. We've talked about what imagination is. We've talked about types of imagination. We've talked about what you will benefit from enhancing your imagination. Don't go anywhere. Stay with me for the next few minutes. as we go in through the strategies for enhancing imagination. Um, Before I actually do this, I will just take a 1 minute break. All right. I'll just take a 1 minute break. Okay. And I will be with you in 1 minute. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, I am back. Fantastic. So let's get into this. Strategies for enhancing imagination. Okay, number one, whole brain goal setting. How do you set goals? You see, let's say a lot of people get it wrong this way. They get it wrong from the start. All right. And the reason why a lot of people don't achieve their goals is because they don't understand what it means to set goals. Some of you have had coaches, mentors, or you read books about setting goals, and all you hear about is what the smart goals. Goals have to be smart. Okay. So what is smart goals? It has to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time framed. Yes, fair enough. Those are smart goals. Looks very smart. But is that enough? Probably not. Okay. And that's why this kind of goal setting does not engage all of the brain. If you want to engage in whole brain goal setting, you've got to introduce not just the smart goals, but the safe goals. All right. Safe goals. So your goals have to be not only smart. I don't have time to really explore all of this right now, but they have to be safe. Maybe one day I'll talk about goal setting. Maybe at the beginning of the year, I'll talk about goal setting. So you just watch out for that. All right. I'll talk about whole brain goal setting. I can go deep into that and courtesy of enhancing performance. All right. So see it, accept it, feel it, and express it. So smart goals are connected to the center of logic and reasoning, which is mostly within the left hemisphere. All right, but the safe goals have more connections. This is not exclusive, by the way, but they have deep connections with the other part of the brain. So you're using your whole brain. So when your goals are smart and safe, all right, they are deep. They are deeply rooted. They have a deep connection. They have deep meaning to you. They have deep meaning to you. Okay. So whole brain goal setting involves the whole brain. It's not just your thinking brain, okay? Because smart goals are connected to the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of thinking and analytical reasoning. So, oh yes, what do I want to do? It has to be smart. It has to be specific, measurable. It's all analytical stuff. All right. But your safe goals connect with your limbic system, with your feelings, because you can see it, you can feel it, you can imagine it. How can you see a goal if you can't imagine? By imagining it, by visualizing it, by brooding on it, reflecting on it, meddling on it with it. All of that engages your limbic system, whole brain goal setting. All right. And this is, from this insights are from my model on the neuroscience of coaching. All right. And having coaching conversations. All right. With for those who are coaches here. So you lead people not just to make smart goals, but safe goals. And that's just because the smart goals engage the prefrontal cortex, but the safe goals also connect to the limbic system. All right. So when we talk about whole brain goal setting, it starts with you writing down a smart goal, but doesn't stop there. Once you've written a smart goal, you now make it safe. What would life look like? And how can I feel like and I achieve this goal? So let me move. So it starts with goal setting. All right. Being able to see, all right, achieve it, feel it, and embrace your goal. Okay. Now, embracing constraint. This is very important because almost every organization, individual, or team who is successful will go through constraints. And a lot of people see constraints as barriers to creativity and imagination, but they're not. Constraints can actually foster imagination. Constraints produce foster imagination, enhance imagination, and that can lead to increase into innovation, creativity, and increased productivity because they represent a motivation. They help us focus our energies, our efforts into a clearly defined way of moving forward. Okay, so one has to embrace them. We are limited. There are many constraints in all the things we want to do. No matter what your goals are, once you've defined your goals, you will find constraints, you will find barriers. One of the ways you can enhance your imagination so that you can be more productive is by embracing those constraints, all right, and pushing through those constraints, not avoiding them, pushing through them, working with those constraints, changing your mental posture. That yes, okay, this is where I am right now. I'm going to embrace this situation. I'm going to work with it, and I'm going to see what I have. I will start with what I have, not with what I do not have. Okay, let me tell you the story of this machine. This machine actually revolutionized access to rural medical care. This was in the United States. All right, so this is a GE um, Mac 400 ECG machine. So it's an electrocardiograph machine. So ECG, so it's a machine that helps to check the heart rhythm, the cardiac rhythm, the heart rhythm. All right, and detect heart attacks and stuff like that. And so GE, a massive, medical equipment company, biomedical company, decided to produce this machine. But in order to develop this machine, they gave their engineers some really important constraints. And in fact, the research on this project later found that those GE engineers were not successful despite the constraints, but they were successful because of the constraints, and that the constraints they faced actually helped and empower them, help them to innovate and solve the problem. Okay, so what constraints did these engineers face? Okay, in order to number one, the machine had to be portable. You must be able to fit into a backpack. They had to be battery operated. Okay, the machine had to have the latest technology, so they couldn't downgrade. This machine was already, it's a big machine in the hospitals, but now this machine needs to be taken to the rural areas. So it has to be portable, battery operated. It has to still have the latest technology. It must cost less than $1 per scan. All right, so it must still be cheap. And the total budget was $500,000. Guess what? The hospital grade machine, the budget was $5.4 million. This was early, this was in the 80s. All right. So the budget was less, and they gave them a time frame of just 18 months. And they got these engineers together, all right, to work. When people embrace constraints, when projects are not open-ended, when there's no time frame, when there are no constraints, people just become lax. All right. So constraints, you've got to embrace them. They're there all the time. They are limited. We're limited in time, in personnel, in resources. We're always going to be limited. But the mental posture to your limitation is what matters. All right. Very important. Okay. And that's because our constraints generate arousal stress that gets us going. Arousal stress that gets us going. In order for us to perform at our peak, we need a little bit of stress. And that stress is not distress, it's not excessive stress. There's a balance here. Okay, there's an arousal stress that helps engineer creativity. This is the Harvard Business Review, in a paper that I read in the Harvard Business Review on why constraints are good for innovation. They looked at 145 different companies, different case studies, and what they found was that constraints were very powerful in improving creativity and innovation for individuals or for organizations, but that it only becomes a problem when the constraints are too high. So there has to still be a balance there. Okay, so there has to be a balance. It's only when the constraints become too high that they stifle creativity. But there's a little bit of constraints. I like talking about the iPhone because I'm an iPhone fan. All right. When Steve Jobs launched the iPhone in 2007, well, I read the brief Steve Jobs gave his engineers, all right, to develop and design the iPhone. Look at this, the brief for the iPhone. Number one, it had to be thin, less than zero point 0.5 inches thick. It had to have a glass screen. It had to have a touch screen interface at the time when physical buttons were the order of the day. All right. It had to have long battery life relative to that time. It must be easy to use. It must be affordable. Good luck with that. And they gave him a time frame of 6 months. This would have been mission impossible. A lot of companies would have given up. This was not possible. But this man had seen something and said, "This is it. All right. And I want you to deliver this in 6 months." They did it. Yes, it would have been stressful and difficult, but that was a game changer. That changed our world. The iPhone literally changed our world. But it didn't come like that. It came because of constraints. So you've got to learn to embrace constraints. You need a healthy dose of constraints in your business, in your personal life. You need a healthy dose of constraints to be able to achieve that. Okay. Why? Because when there are no constraints in the creative process, complacency sets in and people will just follow the path of least resistance. Just follow the path of least resistance. And when you come, you don't even want to dig deep again to get the best ideas. You just go with the most intuitive idea. Anything that comes to your mind, you just take it right rather than really digging deep. So constraints provide us with, focus, helps us to channel our energies, motivates us, helps us to search for, to search deeper. Constraints make our imagination flourish more because we're pushed. We need that arousal stress. So don't run away from challenges. Okay, that leads me to the second point: identify and challenge mental barriers. All right, mental barriers are beliefs that hold you back, that prevent you from making progress or taking action, and they can stifle your imagination. So if you're going to enhance your imagination, you must do a bit of self-reflection and identify what are those mental barriers. Let me tell you the story about this man. Okay, Mansukabai Prajapati. Mr. Prajapati from India was born in 1970. He was born to a porter. Sorry, I just need to take this call. I think it's the hospital. Just give me a second, guys. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so Mr. Prajapati, I was talking about him, and I was talking about enhancing imagination. All right, talking about just remind myself what identifying barriers, identifying challenging barriers. So this man was born in the 70s. He was born to a poor porter. All right, and all he knew about in growing up was how to use clay to make objects, how to design objects with clay. So he was in school in 1980. He failed in his 10th grade and had to drop out of school. He wasn't academically gifted. All he knew was making clay and doing, making objects from clay. So he went to work in a factory, and one day he dreamt that he would be able to make a bakery machine with clay. That was his goal, that if I can make, you know, an oven and all these machines for making bread, if I can make it with clay, it'll be really nice. But guess what? There was a barrier. And that was from his father and his boss. They just all felt that he was a disappointment. And he faced heavy discouragement from them. All right. They thought he was crazy. What this obsession with clay? His father was a porter. His father didn't want him to be a porter. His father didn't want him. His father wanted him to go to school, but he just couldn't walk it. They say there's a difference between intelligence and creativity. I said that in my last webinar, the web neuroscience of creativity and intelligence. All right. There's a difference, and the underpinning type of thinking is different. Intelligence involves convergent thinking, whereas creativity involves divergent thinking. So this young man was very frustrated as a person until 2001, when there was a massive earthquake in his part of India, and there was no electricity. No electricity. That was a problem. So he pushed through that mental barrier that he had. That he said, nothing could come out of clay. His father said, nothing could come out of clay. We're living a poor life. I'm a porter. I have lived my whole life making clay. Get out of this clay thing. It's not going to do anything. But this boy was obsessed with clay. And when the electricity, their whole town was cut off from the main grid because of the earthquake, there was no electricity. He realized his dream that yes, he could make a clay refrigerator that would run without electricity. On that screen, there is a clay refrigerator that runs without electricity. He took a loan of 30,000 rupees. I don't know what in that time would be in terms of the dollar equivalent. And he took a loan to execute that project. And today he's a successful entrepreneur who is creating solutions, you know, using his dream, his idea, his technical know-how. Look at him. He was given a TED talk. Can you imagine? The man who dropped out of school at year 10. giving multiple TED Talks all over the world, all right, talking about his ingenious, is talking about his amazing innovative technology made from clay, creating, and look at that, is developed. When I looked at this, the I think it's called Mythical, and I was reading about this whole, you know, product. It's got a whole website, and they're selling all kinds of stuff. So you can actually buy a refrigerator that doesn't run with electricity, and it's made of clay. All right, and that's the man. All right, so you got to break mental barriers. All right, to unleash your imagination. All right, so the other thing that you can help you enhance your imagination is visualization. Visualization involves creating that mental picture, it's actively creating a mental picture of what you want to achieve. And then you focus on that image until it becomes a realization, it becomes a reality. All right. And visualization is really powerful. Visualization is connected to purpose. Sorry, to focus. It's connected to focus. All right. So the you that you see is the you that you'll become. And this is not motivational stuff. I'm not just trying to motivate you, inspire you, but it's just the truth. So your change begins by surrounding yourself with a picture of what you want to become. All right. What you put before your eyes in your productive season through concentration is what you will carry in your life. That's just the truth. So many times you have to see it first before you can handle it. All right. You've got to see it first many times. You've got to train yourself to concentrate more on what you want than what you don't want. All right. The good thing is that your imagination cannot be limited by your environment. So if you're in an environment that is not positive, in an environment that's not conducive, you've got to leverage on the power of your imagination. It's a gift that you have. All right. And by doing that, you're going to be activating centers in your brain that will select what you see in the environment, alter your perception, all right, and that will direct your focus to the things that you want. Focus is essential. The way to sustain mental focus is with visual focus. Visual focus comes before mental focus. And one very good example of this is that if I get a child to do mathematics, and I say, hey, if I get a 4 year old, 5 year old to do a simple math, 3 plus 3, what would the kid do? They will count their fingers, isn't it? They'll say, oh, I hold three in my hand. All right, I hold three in my hand, and then I count 4, 5, 6. Why does a 3 year old, 4 year old have to count fingers to add 3 plus 3? That's because visual focus precedes mental focus. In our development, we develop visual focus before mental focus. We need to see it first before we can internalize it. Well, except for geniuses like Tesla. Okay, except for that, somebody who could picture anything in their minds. And if you've seen kids that are very good in maths. We call them very intelligent kids. You see them on social media. You give them a random word, 835 multiplied by 657, and the kids will do that. They've got powerful mental focus. Not many people can do that, not even myself. I can't multiply 835 by 637 without writing it down. Visual focus. Because it's complex, I need to write it down and then I can work it out. I can work out any math when it comes to addition, subtraction, the basic math. I can work it out. It doesn't matter how complex the number is, even if it's decimal. I can work it out if I write it out. Okay. And I noticed that I've been teaching my 12-year-old, giving him some extra maths lessons, after school. We've been just doing the work. And I realized that, hey, I'm still good in math. All right. And there are a few things that questions I we would try to study. And while doing it, I already know the answer. I just look at the question, I know the answer. But he has to work it out. He has to work it out. And he doesn't know the answer. He can't tell me the answer straight away. He still has to work it out because he's still learning. All right. Visual focus helps to anchor mental focus. Let me tell you, if you have a goal in life and you have a focus that you want to pursue, a project or something that you want to pursue, you've got to anchor it. You don't grow out of it. Every time you drift away, the way to anchor your focus in life, your goal, whether it's for a season, for a month, for a year, for whatever, is to anchor it with your vision. Okay, very important. And I wrote this down. Use visual focus to improve your mental focus. If you have difficulty focusing on your mind, try focusing your visual system. All right, it's very important that you understand this. Very important that you understand this. I've got to move on because of time. And these are very good examples that I use. I've used them before. If you've heard me speak, Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister was the first man to run the mile under 4 minutes. The first person to run a mile under 4 minutes. Do you know that the year Roger Bannister ran the mile under 4 minutes, two or three other people broke the world record? Sometimes people are just waiting for the first person to do it.
Once you see somebody else do it, everybody just does it. Have you noticed that there's some things that it's like it will never happen in life, but once one person does it, everybody does it. Everybody just breaks the barrier. Everybody just does it. That's the power of visualization. That's the power of visualization. When you see somebody do it, you just they just inspire you. When you see somebody like you doing something, you're just inspired. I got inspired by Ben Carson. I read his book, Gifted Hands. And I said, hey, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I watched the movie again. All right. And I was like, wow, I have to be a neurosurgeon. All right. But when I read the book, I was not studying medicine when I read the book. I was so inspired that, I said, yes, I am going to, be a neurosurgeon. Of course, when I was an intern, I fainted twice in theater when I saw arterial blood. That was when I realized, man, now I'm not going to be a neurosurgeon. So I chose the next best thing, which is being a neurologist and, and a neuroscientist. So at least I don't see too much of blood. All right. So that's important. Florence Chadwick was the first woman to swim the English Channel across from England to France. And the first time she did it, she failed. But the next time she wanted to swim across the English Channel, she started from the end. She went to see the end. She pictured what the finish line was. And then she tried swimming it again. And even though it was hard and the water was cold, she was able to push through. All right, look at what Lindsey Vann said. By the time I get to the start gate, I've run that race 100 times in my head, visualizing every single turn that I will take. All right. So these are athletes who do that. All right. Even in neurology, when we're talking about rehabilitation, we do the same thing. We use the mirror technique, for rehabilitating stroke patients. All right. So you can see, for example, in the second panel here, the good hand is hidden behind the mirror and the weak hand is squeezing a ball. So when the patient squeezes the ball, all right, the good hand is the one squeezing the ball and the weak hand is behind the mirror. So when the patient looks at the mirror, they see their good hand. So they squeeze the ball with the good hand and they see their good hand, but to them it's a reflection. And so it looks like it's the weak hand. And so you're tricking the brain, all right, by visualizing this. You're tricking the brain. So actually, you're not working on the weak hand, you're working on the good hand. But by using the mirror technique, you're actually visualizing yourself doing it. Okay. So, and I remember that he says, so this is very important. Visualization is very important. Yeah, this was my vision board a few years ago. All right, this was a vision board a few years ago. I can't tell you the story about this. I had a vision board. I called it an action board. All right, and I just written my book at the time, and I, wanted to launch the book, and I wanted to write more books, um, and I wanted to host John Maxwell, and it happened. My son was young, and I thought, okay, yes, I wanted to have a better relationship with him, and it happened. I wanted to, work with people and work with teams, and it happened. Global brand. Well, not sure we're there yet, but at least so many of you all over the world are connected with me right now. Okay. So almost finished. Create an environment that fosters creativity. You got to create an environment that fosters creativity. All right. If you want, when the only example I'll give here, I read this letter, which is the Google founders IPO letter, written by Larry Page and Sergey Brin. I read their letter when they took Google public, and it was just a fascinating read of the mind of creators. Look at what they wrote. We encourage our employees, in addition to their regular projects, to spend 20% of their time working on what they think will most benefit Google. This empowers them to be more creative and innovative. Many of our significant advances have happened in this manner. For example, AdSense for content and Google News were both prototyped in 20% time. Most risky projects fizzle, often teaching us something. Others succeed and become attractive businesses. So when Google started, I'm not sure whether they still do this. All right, but this was when they went public. I think in 2003, in the early 2000s or 2007. I can't remember the exact date they went public. This was a letter that the founders wrote to all the potential investors. And they talked about 20% time, that every week, every employee had 20% of their time to pursue their own projects, of course, in line with Google, but not under any supervision. So they allowed you to be imaginative, to be creative, to do something, create a project that will benefit the organization. AdSense. AdSense. You know what AdSense is? It's an advertising program that allows websites to, display ads. So when you go on ads on different websites and you see all those small ads, that was AdSense. It was somebody's personal project who was working for Google. It wasn't the bosses, the managers that brought that up. It was just an employee who thought about that. How can we advertise on people's websites? And they developed AdSense. Do you know that AdSense now represents 22% of Google's advertising revenue? In 2020, that was about $32 billion. $32 billion a year from a pet project of an employee. 20 years later, it represents about 22% of their ad revenue. You've got to create an environment. That's why they succeed. Allow people to pursue their projects and create an environment that will foster innovation. All right. Let me take some questions. Wow, 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 wow. Stop there. Stop there. We've had over 2 hours of this. Over 2 hours of this. Let me know how you feel. Let me know how this has been for you. Let me know how this has been for you. Are you still with me? Are you still with me? Let me know. Let me know. Put it there in the chat. How's it been? Did you get value? Did you get value? How's it been for you? Are you getting, did you get anything out of this? Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Powerful session. That's good. Thank you, Victor. Oh, Victor. Yes. All the way from Europe. So we're certainly a global brand. Emmanuel. God bless you, Emmanuel from Sydney. These are my people. All right. Adewumi. Oh, sorry, Adewumi. Yes. Thank you. Adewumi. Yeah. You want to hear more? Well, make sure you connect with me next month when I talk about neurodiversity. All right. We're going to talk about neurodiversity next month. All right. Either next month or the month after, we're going to have a webinar on neurodiversity. All right. Good, 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 good. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us. So, any questions? Questions? Any questions of the day? Hit me. Any questions? Fantastic. I think I saw a question up there. If you have a question, let me know. If you have any question, let me know. Let me know. How do I deal with brain fog as an artist? Very interesting, very important thing. How do I deal with brain fog? So it depends on what you mean by brain fog. But a lot of people get brain fog when they're exhausted. It's a sign of distress. What generally happens. There are many reasons why people get into that state, but in my experience, the most common reason why people get brain fog is because they are just overwhelmed and overloaded. It's a sign of distress, excessive stress. As I said, you need a little bit of stress, which is arousal stress, to get you going. That's why 1 hour before the deadline, you are more likely to be engaged in an activity than 1 month. How many times have you rushed to the dead when rushed an email, or you sent a project just when the deadline is approaching? When the deadline is approaching, somehow you just get the energy to do it. Okay. Now, the reality is that when you allow a lot of stress and you don't manage your arousal stress, it can turn into distress, and that can affect you generally. The many reasons why people get brain fog, in my experience, from a clinical point of view, people can get brain fog because they're just depressed and anxious, they're stressed, they're not sleeping well. If you're sleep deprived, of course your brain will be foggy, you can't focus, because brain the restoration of brain function occurs in sleep, in deep sleep. So you're not having enough sleep, or you have sleep apnea, you can get brain fog. Some people, it's just a headache. Some people have chronic headaches, tension headaches, migraines, and so they can't focus, they can't process things properly. But for some people, but for the majority of people, it's just the fact that they can't handle stress, all right, or they're overwhelmed. So one of the things I would often tell people is to just find a way to distress. All right. One of the things that would help is to have regular brain breaks. So, for example, if you're an artist and you're trying to do something, remember that your brain's attentional capability and your brain's overall cognitive production is limited. So you can only be at your peak for about 90 minutes at a time. About 90 minutes. And in fact, within the 90 minutes, your peak performance within a 90-minute cycle, because the brain is almost goes through what we call an ultradian rhythm that runs for almost every 90 minutes. Within that 90 minutes, you're probably going to be at your peak for about 45 to 50 minutes. Because within that cycle, you warm up a little bit where you're trying to get in, and then you get into flow. And you may be in flow for like 45 minutes to 1 hour. You're in flow and you're just getting ideas, and you're doing all kinds of stuff and all that. You can't sustain that peak. It's just not possible. oftentimes your mind will wander away, you'll be distracted, you would have one wandering thought or something will come up and you will just lose your focus. What I would often tell people, the best protocol to have is to time yourself. All right, after 90 minutes, 2 hours max, you take a break. So have regular brain breaks. The brain break could be walking around, taking, you know browsing the internet, doing some online shopping, checking Facebook, taking a walk, having a cup of coffee, or just meditating, or just lying down in a state of non-sleep deep rest. So non-sleep deep rest, where you just lie down, you're just listening to silence or listening to light music. Just give yourself a break. If you give yourself a break for 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes max, so within a 4 hour period, if you have that kind of protocol, 90 minutes, 10, 20 minutes, 90 minutes, 10, 20 minutes of break, and you plan yourself, you'll be very productive and you will reduce the risk of brain fog. But as I said, for a lot of other people, it's just lack of sleep, exhaustion, and all that that leads to it. Next question: What are the possible limitations to imagination? I'm not sure what you mean by limitations to imagination, but imagination is not everything. You cannot imagine yourself out of poverty. No. So what we're talking about here is not, some of these extreme YouTube gurus, fake gurus who talk about you just imagine yourself out of poverty. No, you cannot. Any theology, in the words of Edin Owunka, any theology, any um, any philosophy, anything that absolves you of personal responsibility is a fraud. So if anybody tells you that you can think and imagine yourself out of any situation, is a fraud. That's not true. But when you activate and enhance your imagination, it can prime you to act. You still have to act. So I give you an example of my own, imagination and how I was able to, break that barrier in my public speaking. But I still studied the dictionary. I still studied speeches. I wrote speeches. I practiced speeches. I taught the children maths. I ran a tutoring center. I did a lot of things. I exposed myself. I applied myself. I wasn't just sitting down somewhere imagining that one day I'll be able to do this and that. No. All right. So, of course, that's a limitation to imagination in that context. You've got to put in the work. How do I train my brain to do all of this? How long does it take? Forget about how long it takes. You don't have to do all of this. Find one thing you want to do. Find one thing, set a goal, whole brain goal setting. Set a goal for yourself. So it depends on what stage you are in your life and what you want to do. All right. Your brain can be trained. Certainly, you can enhance your imagination in any particular area. It starts with you finding a goal. What do I want to achieve? What do I want to do? Start with your why. Remember the last webinar that I had, I talked about the why. Start with your why. What do I want to achieve, and why do I want to achieve what I want to achieve? That's where you start from. So once you've identified what you want to achieve, you start with it and you start working towards it. So don't complicate things. All right. Don't complicate things. Just start with what you have, and then if you come back, you can come back to watch this webinar so you can pick up those things I talked about. Whole brain goal setting. Set your goals. Embrace the constraints. You're going to face constraints. There are constraints of time, money, all of those things. You face those constraints. Embrace those constraints. And but when you're embracing those constraints, you dig deep. You're going to get ideas. You're going to get you're going to be able to push through those barriers. All right. And before you know it, you will achieve it. Any other question? I think I saw one. All right. Can you emphasize more on breaking through the resistance phase while trying to master a skill or habit? Absolutely. All right. As I said, the the stronger a habit will become, the higher the resistance you would face. All right. Yeah. So if there's any habit that is a part of you, before that habit was formed, there must have been a lot of resistance. And it's harder when you're a grown person. When you're an adult and you want to form a new habit, if that habit is going to be sustainable, you may face a lot of resistance. Meaning, and that's how you make that habit non-contextual, so that it happens all the time. All right. So if you want to meditate, I remember when I started listening to silence and I wanted to be, oh yeah, I wanted to practice the habit of not just listening to my own thought. Like I just wanted to sit down and listen to nothing and just practice the act of silence. That was tough. That was tough because once you do that, a thought will run through your mind. Your phone will vibrate. Okay, you put the phone away. There'll be even self distraction. That's when something will just pop up in your mind. I'm like, oh my God. But then I would anchor myself back. I would anchor myself back. No, no, no. Anchor myself back. So it takes a lot of repetition, a lot of repetition, a lot of repetition. Okay. So it starts with your why. Why do you want to do that thing? Why do you want to learn that skill? Once you have the why, you know why you want to do it. There's meaning into it. You set the goal around that why. Okay, I want to achieve this. I want to lose 10 kilograms in weight so that I can fit into my wedding dress, or so that I can be healthy. Okay. And I'm going to set goals around this. Okay. My goal is this, this, and this. I want to lose the 10 kilograms within a 3 month period. Okay. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go through an exercise program, through a diet program, whatever it is. Okay. You set those, put those things in motion. It's going to be challenged, but your why is what will anchor you. So when the resistance comes, I've given you one way of overcoming resistance: mental rehearsal. So before you go to the gym, don't just rush out. Sit down and plan it. Imagine yourself doing it. Wake up and just picture it. Close your eyes. Picture every step of the way. Picture every step of the way. That's what sports psychologists do for their athletes. They get them to relieve the moment. Just imagine every turn when you're driving your Formula One car. Imagine every turn when you're running the race, the marathon through the streets. Imagine every kick when you're involved in a UFC fight or a boxing fight. All right. He's going to do this. Imagine how you're going to wave, or how you're going to, dodge his kick. All right. So you visualize it. By visualizing it, you're priming your brain for action, but you still have to act. You still have to act. You can't just imagine yourself out of poverty, or you can't just imagine yourself that way. No, you got to act on it. So mental rehearsal can help you break that resistance, and then just start in small bits, and maybe getting an accountability person, somebody to hold you accountable. You can have self accountability. You probably need to get my course. If you get my course on the neuroscience um, of um, of performance, so there's a part of that course where I talked about habit formation, developing high performance habits, and what I talked about, the strength of a habit, overcoming limbic friction, overcoming resistance. It's all in the course. So the course goes for $99 US. If you register today and go in that link, you get a 50% discount. 50% just for the first 24 hours. You'll get a 50% discount. You find it very useful. Um, any other question? I think I saw another question. Why is it easier to imagine negative? Yeah, that's just a negative bias. Your brain exists to keep you alive. Your brain's primary role is to keep you alive. The reason why you have a brain is to keep you alive. And how can you stay alive? By avoiding threats. So there's a negative bias in your brain. Your brain is negatively wired to help you avoid threats, the threats in your society. When man was a hunter gatherer, the threats were lions and bears and wild animals. But now the threats are, you know, emails, phone calls, meetings, work in progress, meetings, and stuff like that. That's it. So your brain is constantly at a subconscious level scanning your environment for threats. All right. And that happens whether you like it or not. So your brain is processing all the sensory information, all the words you're hearing, all the things you're saying, all the things you're feeling, all the things you're smelling, every perception, everything that comes, every sensory information that comes to you, your brain is processing them for threat at a subconscious level. You're not even aware of that. So there's a negative bias. That's why bad news sells. That's why, negative news sells faster than positive news. The other day, I was telling somebody yesterday, a patient, I saw a patient yesterday, and I told them that, I never knew that people were doing Google reviews about my work as a clinician, as a neurologist, until a patient came into my office and said, I'd finished with her, and she was a solicitor. She was a solicitor. She said, "Hey, doc, I almost did not come to see you." I said, "Why?" She said, "I Googled you, and I saw some negative reviews." I said, "Wow, you saw some negative reviews?" I said, "Well, I didn't even know that I existed on Google. I didn't realize that once your business is registered on Google, people can make reviews. I never knew about that." And of course, I realized that those people that made negative reviews were people that did not get what they wanted, whether it's a script, a medication, or a letter of support for their pension or whatever. And so people then go on to do bad things. So I realized that, wow, all the good patients that loved me will not go into reviews. How many times have you done a review on a product that you really loved? But how many times have you gone onto Amazon to complain, or Google to complain about a product you did not like? There's that negative tendency, there's that negative bias, that inclination that we are likely to act when we're not happy than we're happy. It's just the way we're wired. Now, don't go and Google me. Don't Google me, okay? Um, what's the question? Oyinda says, so why do schools set exams that are longer than 90 minutes? Go ask them. I don't know. They're meant to stretch you. So this has nothing to do with exams. This is just brain science. So that's why you're here. You know more. You know better now. So the exams are not meant to make it easy for you. They're meant to stress you, isn't it? But I'm just talking about you having a protocol that would help you if you want to accelerate your learning. All right, break it down. Have breaks. That's all. So have breaks. Look at this. Our webinar has gone on for a long time now. All right, I've stretched you a little bit, but I should have taken like a 5 minute break in between. I only had a 1 minute toilet break. um, how does soothing music restore and refresh the mind? Music is actually very powerful, with imagination. Music is very powerful. And music helps. If you go to my webinar on the neuroscience of creativity, I talked about how music can enhance creativity. All right. And that's been proven that when we listen to music, depending on what type of music we listen to, it has a way of activating certain centers in our brain that can help us relax, that can help us become more intuitive, that can help us improve our, be more imaginative, all right, and creative. There's certainly no doubt about that. And in fact, studies have been done in children that are exposed to music and children that learn to play musical instruments are not necessarily more intelligent, but they are more creative. They are more able to solve problems and they have a better world view, okay, than children that are not. So some people, in fact, I don't think my kids are musically inclined, but it's still I still make them, learn musical instruments because I just feel it's helpful for their development. It's helpful for their appreciation of other people, of art, because music is art, and it's also helpful for them in terms of their brain development and can help generate and foster creativity. Some people, for example, when they're in that creative space, they would play some music. You will see footballers, for example, before they go on the field, they will all put on their beats headsets, their headphones, and listen to all kinds of music, whether or in the gym. If you're doing a workout, if you go to any gym, you see all those kind of music that would help. There's a way that connects and can help improve performance. Any other question before we round up? I think there was just one more that was put up there. Any more questions, team? All right, I think we'll stop here. So whenever I watch movies, it usually continues in my dreams. So I have to stop watching movies whenever I want to sleep. My question is, how can I turn that part of me for my advantage? Well, yeah. So your dreams. Sorry, I didn't have time to talk about dreams, like the real dreams. And maybe we'll have to do that later. There was just so much content. I had so many slides that I had to cut out a lot of the content how to fit into this. But dreams are imaginations that occur when we sleep. Okay, and there are many reasons why we dream. All right, there are many reasons why we dream. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do an injustice to the topic by just giving you a very perfunctory answer, but I'll say yes. So when we dream and we get into what we call the REM stage of sleep, which is where dreaming tends to occur. During dreaming, a lot of our experiences during the day are replayed and consolidated. So actually, what happens sometimes when we dream, not all the time, but sometimes when we dream, is that the memories of the day are consolidated, and that's how we move our our memories from the short term into the long term memory, and that's how memories are consolidated. So a lot of those things are played back, but of course they are played back because in a different way. Because when we're in a dream state, we're in the opposite spectrum of the stress state. So if that's another reason why you should get my online course, because there I talk about the alert, the alert. I talked about the alert calm spectrum. So going from extreme stress to sleep, I mean sleep, and I talk about how we process space and time. So when you are in a dream state, you process space and time in a different way. You slice through space and time in a different way. That's why you can be dreaming of yourself being in Las Vegas, and the next thing you see yourself in your village. All right. That's why you can be talking to President Obama in your dream, and the next time you're having an argument with a bus conductor. All right. Because you just slice through space and time. It's all modeled up together. All right. Whereas when you are in a stress state, the way you process space and time is different, completely different. We can't go into all of those details, but it's true that a lot of, if you, for example, imagine a lot in the daytime, remember that dreams are imaginations that occur in sleep. All right. So if you during the daytime imagine a lot of stuff, All right, you're likely, those imaginations, all right, especially if they are new and novel, they're likely to be consolidated in your sleep, and you're likely to see them. So it's very common. When I lost my father, for example, and I felt so bad about losing my father when he passed away, I saw him a lot in my dreams. I saw it a lot. I didn't have to read too many meanings, or I didn't over spiritualize. Some people over spiritualize dreams. Doesn't mean that there's no spiritual connotation to dreams. That's why I don't want to go into that. Without, I don't want to sort of give it a very shallow answer, but there's a bit of nuance to that as well. I hope I've answered that question. All right. So just one or two more announcements. There's a book coming out, very interesting book, coming out later this year, Changing You. Multiple authors, a couple of thought leaders that I've met over the years. We came together to write this book. You'll find it very useful. So, make sure you join my mailing list so that you can get the alert about this book, Changing You. This book will literally change your life. And you can get my other books, they're available on my website or on Amazon. You can get any of these books either in the paperback or ebook version. And for my autobiography, Navigating Change, you can actually get that in hardcover version as well. So it's been a pleasure spending some time with you today, talking about the neuroscience of imagination. I have to go to the hospital now to do a ward round and see some patients. So thank you for joining me, and I wish you the very best as you explore this wonderful journey of imagination. I look forward to you setting great goals, building, you know, your future, the future you hope for in your mind. Remember that it's only the future that you picture that you can feature. That's not just a motivational quote, that is the truth. So start picturing your future, start working towards the future that you desire, and you'll live it. And when you do so, share with me, let me know. If you want me to work with you in that journey, send me an email. Very exclusive. I don't do a lot of coaching. So very, very selective. And it's very expensive too. So if you don't have money, don't bother sending me an email. You have to make me want to coach you. All right, guys. Um, it's been a great pleasure, and I hope to see you soon. I'll just get one of my team members to come up and maybe say a few things. Do I have any of the team members there who wants to come up? Maybe they're all shy. Do I have any of the team members? All right, guys. No one is showing up. You take care of yourselves and have a wonderful, wonderful time. Cheers.